Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to 6060 Sports. Ladies and gentlemen,
Fantasy fundamentals from the family.
family.
It's sure like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When your hands shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever is applicable to you. This is the 6460 Fantasy Fundamentals from the Family. I am Josh Coleman, this is Brady Todd Coleman, and this is Olivia Grace Coleman. The OGC, the BTC, and the JBC, bringing it, the fantasy business to you like no other. So, the headlines and the deadlines for this week. Let's get started. Albert Pujols is out 4 to 6 weeks with some wrist injuries. A little concerning. What do you think? What do you think?
I like you.
If I was a Cardinal fan, I'd be going boo-hoo right now. Lance Berkman, first base. John Jay, everyday outfield status. Next, Justin Morneau to the DL. Look who's first base. Jim Tomey, hurry back. Tommy comes back, probably has some value. Hughes, not so much. AL only play right there. Mr. Hold on. Let's get back to focus. Mr. 3000, Derek Jeter, 7 hits shy of the mark, coming to Cincinnati, but something happened along the way. Out! A DL stint. Brett Gardner takes the top spot in the Yankees lineup. Eduardo Nunez, the shortstop. Any thoughts?
I wish I could be at my grandpa's.
Any thoughts?
I miss mommy.
Basically what they're saying is Brett Gardner's value up the charts. Eduardo Nunez, AL only play. If you're starving for runs, you may want to consider. Next! Hold on. Carl Crawford, the 1 year I take him with my first pick. It's been a disaster and the misery continues with the DL stint. Mike Cameron, Jason McDonald, Jason Reddick, or Darnell McDonald. It doesn't matter what the McDonald's name is because he's not a McDonald's All-American. Okay? He's nothing. Any thoughts? Any thoughts?
I like mommy and I miss her, so I want to watch her sing a song.
Bottom line is, what that meant is avoid all three and hope that Crawford comes back. Next, Dustin Ackley makes his Major League debut to a lot of fanfare in the Emerald City. Ackley, 2 or 3 years in the minors, second pick behind Steven Strasburg 2 years ago. Basically right now you're looking at a great disciplined hitter with a great batter's eye who has the potential to hit around 300 even in his rookie year. Doesn't have a lot of power, but it's not going to hurt you out of the keystone position. You're looking at maybe 10 to 15 if things go well with maybe double-digit stolen base totals. Pretty good player, probably a better real player than a fantasy player, at least in the early going, and probably could be that way during his career. Any thoughts?
I wish Lacey could find me.
Any thoughts?
I've been watching football with you.
Baseball, dude. Next, Tommy Hanson to the DL. Mark Miner will take over full time until Hanson returns, even when Brandon Beachy comes back from his rehab assignment. So Mike Minor owners who have been praising him since the early pre-draft fanfare, Bob, that would be you. Here's your chance for him to shine. Oh, hey, whoa, what?
I gotta go check on this.
Okay, fine. Clay Buchholz to the DL. Andrew Miller will take over his role in the rotation. Miller, a former top prospect in the Tigers and Marlins organizations, so he could kind of resurrect his career in Boston. Probably more of a matchup play at this point, but certainly somebody worth monitoring. Grace, any thoughts?
I wish I could go to the beach.
Wishing and doing are two different things, honey. That's not in the cards right now. Right now we're focusing on fantasy. Brady, any valid input?
I wish Lucy could lick me, and I've been watching baseball with you, and so.
Okay. These players right here are players you may want to consider if you're hard on your luck. If some of these aforementioned players have been injured, or you're just have a bout of unproductive players. These guys are all amongst the top 50 hitters the last 2 weeks. And here we go. Alcides Escobar's hit .468 with 6 steals and is owned in 23% of Yahoo leagues. Jordan Schaefer, .241 with 7 stolen bases, owned in 6%. J.J. Hardy, .353 with 4 homers, owned in 45% of leagues. Angel Pagan, .311, 5 stolen bases, 49% of leagues. Charlie Blackmon, .378, 5 stolen bases, owned in 21% of leagues. Roger Bernardina, .350, 3 stolen bases, 3 homers, owned in 4% of leagues. Austin Jackson, .323, 3 stolen bases, owned in 39% of leagues. Ty Wigginton, .277, 2 home runs, 24% of league. Vernon Wells, .268, 3 home runs, 44% of leagues owned. Jamel Weeks, .364 average, 2 stolen bases, 7% owned. Minor breakdown. Alcides Escobar, flash in the pan unless you're starting for stolen bases. Ignore. Jordan Schaefer, ignore. J.J. Hardy, he is a guy you may want to consider. Not a .353 hitter, obviously, but probably could bat in the 260s, 270s with some pop for the shortstop. Perfect replacement for Derek Jeter at this point. Angel Pagan, a guy I like. Not a great hitter. 270, 280, possibly 290 on the high side with 5 to 10 home runs and could be a potential 20 stolen base guy. Certainly a guy you want to probably target. Charlie Blackmon, who knows? Don't know what kind of track record. Decent in minors, nothing elite. Certainly not a .378 hitter, but if he gets on base about 36% of the time, 35% of the time with Rockies, should have some run scoring value and is a decent stolen base threat. Probably worth a speculative ad at this point. Roger Bernardina, a guy I love, probably around a 270, 280 hitter. Does have some pop, could hit 10 to 15 home runs, and could steal 20-some bases. Guy I really like. Only question with him is with Lance Nix playing well, Rick Ankiel, where does he kind of fit into the outfield? I think the injury to LaRoche that has him out for the year, puts Morse over at first, kind of opens up certainly a favorable part of a platoon at the very least for the Nationals, but I think it will end up being a full-time gig. Austin Jackson, a guy who hit 300 last year, but is more of a 270 hitter. His value is tied in runs. He doesn't steal many bases. If he's batting at the top of the lineup and scoring runs, he's worth owning. If not, he's an empty 270, 280 hitter. Ty Wigginton, if you're hard up on a corner infielder, you could probably do worse. Coors Field will certainly help him. He does have 15 to 20 homer pop. With a decent average and probably some solid run production. Multiple position eligibility certainly increases his value. Vernon Wells, I don't know how much stock you put into him. I think he's a decent play, but nothing to get too excited about. If he's out there, go pick him up, but don't think he's a 40 homer guy or anything like that. Finally, Jamil Weeks, much like Jordan Schaefer, just kind of bypassing. Sure, he's hit 364, but he's more of a 260, 270 hitter with not a lot of speed to speak of, nor power, as I previewed last week in my Roto Roundup. And finally, some five pitchers to kind of watch that's been on a tear the last 30 days or so. Carlos Carrasco, 2.72 ERA with a 1.03 WHIP. A little bit concerned about the 5.45 Ks per 9, but he's more of a strikeout pitcher than that. I can kind of see that going up. If that increases, look for Carrasco to actually be kind of a permanent play on your roster. Carson's 1.56 ERA with a .81 WHIP. He's only owned in 17% of leagues. Control guy to the fullest. Doesn't strike out a lot, as indicated by the 4.67 K per 9, but he doesn't walk, which allows him not to avoid some big innings. So more of a matchup play, but certainly a guy to kind of look for when searching for the 2-start option or a matchup guy. Randy Wolf, 2.02 ERA, 1.03 WHIP, 6.75 K per 9. Decent strikeout guy, owned in 29% of leagues. Kind of close to a full-time ownership player. Only problem with Wolf is, and I think I've mentioned this before, he can just as easily go out and give up 10 to the Mariners as he can pitch a shutout against the Yankees. He's just one of those plays. Mike Leake, 2.31 ERA, 1.09 WHIP over the last month. Good defense behind him. Certainly a very viable 2-start or matchup guy. Dude, get the microphone out of the camera. Finally, Tim Wakefield, 3.60 ERA, 1.0 WHIP. Going to be in the Boston rotation until Buchholz or Lackey goes back. Certainly a person to consider. Grace, before we leave, is there anything that you would like to add to the broadcast in terms of fantasy evaluations or anything that you've noticed over the last last week or so in fantasy sports? What we got?
I with Lacey could never go away and see me again.
Bray! Get in here! Bray! Get in here!
I'll play a music.
Come here. I need over here so the camera can see it. So, any last thoughts or anything you'd like to add to that broadcast as far as fantasy advice or anything like that?
Sissy, because when she's growing up, I'm going to see her die, and I wish I could go to the beach someday.
Okay. How about you stand up in the chair? Stand up in the chair. Slowly turn around to the camera. Stop. Basically what he means is that right there. Yeah. He done it. As for me, to you, hope this fantasy week goes well. And as always, if you need someone to call, the JBC is only 10 digits away.
What's the time? Tippy tippy tay, like a game of football.